What was the best you have no power here moment you have ever seen? I grew up around a mother with dissociative disorder as well as narcissism. She was addicted to opiates as far back as I can remember, and would do anything to get them, and I mean anything. Growing up, it wasn't rare for her to have a tantrum during one of her highs and beat the shit out of me, break me down by picking apart every little thing she knew I was afraid or self-conscious of, and actively sabotage my relationship with my father and siblings. She would be up for days at a time, pass out standing up with her eyes glassed over and back hunched, and when she festered once again she would be up and moving and destroy everything in the house. There were times where I'd leave and the house would be clean, and come home and it would look as though a pissed-off tornado had run through the house, i.e. broken glass, animal feces, dirty clothes, roaches, empty pill bottles, ground-up pill residue, and other miscellaneous things littering the house. On particularly bad nights she would hallucinate, and during those times it wouldn't be uncommon to find pools of her blood on the ground from running through glass. I remember being up for days at a time because her and my father would scream at each other for days at a time without stopping, actively trying to get me to pick one side or the other, even if it meant barging into my room at 4 a.m. to begin their screaming match where I could watch. She manipulated me, abandoned me at times in the middle of nowhere when she'd meet up with her various sugar daddies. She was still with my dad during this, and never once apologized during her brief moments of mental clarity. If anything, she would blame everything but herself. In her mind she was infallible. Money was always a big issue since she couldn't work in such a state. She sold some of her pills, yes, but ultimately those funds were used to buy more drugs anyway. Because of this, we were homeless frequently, without power and water for literally years at a time, and barely ever had any food. It was almost every night I went to sleep with the only thing I'd have eaten that day being a school lunch. On weekends, sometimes I didn't eat at all. The rest of my family had no clue this was happening. During the summer when I was 16, my aunt, whom I hadn't talked much with since I was a lot younger, got in touch. She asked if I'd like to come to stay with them in Texas for a few weeks during the summer. Of course I said yes, and I was absolutely ecstatic. I didn't bother asking my parents since I'd be very much surprised if they even noticed I was gone, so they were unaware. My aunt drove up all the way to Iowa and stayed the afternoon with us. My parents seemed to lack the cognition to recognize she was even there out of the blue, so they didn't come out of their room. When she arrived our house was fairly clean. We left for a bit to go get food, and when we returned the tornado had already passed. As she told me when we were on our way to Texas, the thing that bothered her the most wasn't that our house had suddenly gone to hell, it was that I didn't even react to it. Instead, I tiptoed around the debris and started packing my things without a word. This deeply unsettled her, and ultimately she asked me if I was safe where I lived. I said yes, as it was all I had ever known. She told me that what she saw frightened her, and she wanted me to come live with her in Texas. Thinking that she was joking, I brushed it off. After a few days down there though, I knew I had to do it. They showed me love, compassion, and care that I'd never even known existed prior to this, and it shook me to my core. So we decided, I was going to get emancipated from my parents and move in with them. Ultimately, this involved sitting in a courthouse across from my parents and their lawyer. The judge asked why I wanted to leave, and I explained the above. I expressed the love and compassion I'd experienced for the first time in my life, and that I wanted to, for once, live in peace. Their lawyer rebutted, "To me, it seems as though you have no respect for your parents. Is it because of their financial situation? It looks as though you're attached to the perks of living in a family that makes a reasonable amount of money, and not that you want to leave because they're unfit parents." My mother and father joined in, hooting and hollering, actively trying to break me down as they have so many times before. I let them speak, and I held my tongue until it was my turn. They tried to goad me on, tried to break me as they had so many times before, but I wouldn't let them. Finally, the judge asked me to speak. With as level a stare as I could muster, I looked at mother, my father, and their lawyer across from me and said, "If you're asking me if I have no respect for my parents, then you are correct. However, to say it's simply financially motivated is incorrect. I no longer have respect for them because they have." As I was nearly finished, my mother, as she had so many times in the past, began to squirm and scream at me from across the table. "He's lying, the little bastard is just..." Until the judge slammed his gavel down and cut the room, my mother staring up at him in complete and utter disbelief. I looked at her, keeping the tears I knew were right behind the corner at bay, and said, "For once in your life, for once in my life, behave as an adult. You can't stop me by simply yelling over me anymore. You have nothing to hold over me now. You can do nothing." As I spoke, the judge motioned to his officer, who moved towards my mother. Her expression still frozen in complete bewilderment as the officer aggressively told her to get up out of her chair and escorted her out of the room. The judge looked to me, my aunt, my father, and his lawyer with one sweeping glance and then spoke. "I am sorry that you have had to deal with this for so long, young man. There's nothing more that you or anyone else needs to say. You deserve to live a normal life as a normal kid, and it's obvious to me now that your parents are unfit to produce that kind of environment. You will go back to Texas with your aunt, and we will regularly have our social workers in touch to check in on how you are doing. Make the most of this second chance. Good luck, young man." Adjourned. Though the bang of his gavel was the only noise that permeated the room, all I could hear was the ringing in my ears. My father and his lawyer were escorted out of the room, and the tears I had held back all this time came gushing out like a tidal wave. It's been 7 years since that day, and I am happy to say that I've managed to grow up and become a well-adjusted adult. I have a great career, great friends, and an amazing girlfriend. I've been in therapy ever since we got back to Texas, and I no longer have trouble sleeping or terrible bouts of anxiety and depression as I used to. Life is good. What horrible thing did your significant other do that ended it all? So I have been together with my girlfriend for almost 8 years. Our relationship was kinda rocky since I usually have to go on business trips to different countries once in a while, and she's admitted she hates it since she's paranoid that I might be cheating on her. She's gotten cheated before in the past. I, of course, reassured many times that I wasn't. Even to the point I was not drinking while on my trips, trying my best to avoid other female interaction, even calling, texting her anytime I was immediately free to text. She's also pregnant, which I assume made her paranoia worse. Sometimes I'd even wake up to her calling me crying on the phone cause I didn't answer her texts within a minute. I still once again, did everything to clear her suspicions about me, which made me kinda depressed knowing that she doesn't trust me fully enough. Last Tuesday, I came back home early from my trip to surprise her, even buying a big patch of flowers and tickets to a movie she'd been dying to see for a couple months, as well as buying her a ring since I've been wanting to pop the question for a while now. When I arrived back home, I saw a car that I wasn't familiar with parked in the driveway. I assumed it was her friend's car since one of them got her license 9 months ago. As I opened the door to the house, I heard music blasting from our bedroom. I thought this was a bit strange since she doesn't like loud noises. As I came upstairs and entered the bedroom, I saw something I thought I'd never seen in a million years. My girlfriend was riding some guy that I'd never seen before in my life. I'm not gonna go into details about what I did, but the guy ended up leaving the house after 15 or 20 minutes. Afterwards, me and my girlfriend had a shouting match. She was accusing me of all sorts of things, like how I was never around much, I rarely took her on dates anymore, and that I was probably cheating on her while on my business trips. Which is a fucking lie, considering I've always took her out somewhere when I came back from work, even when I was tired as shit, and her accusing me of cheating was a fucking lie because I always showed her that I wasn't, even gave her all my social media's password because I fucking loved her. I don't know why, but I just snapped. I packed all her belongings and threw them out into the cold, rainy street, where she started screaming at me even more for doing that. My head was hurting from the amount of anger that built up, and her screaming in my ear didn't help. Now I don't condone what I did, and I of course regret it, but I just grabbed her and threw her out into the street, where I screamed at her to not come back because the locks would be changed. I slammed the door and called off work for 2 weeks due to a family emergency. Did I do the wrong thing? I just can't find it in my heart to forgive her at all, even though she is carrying my child. My ex-fiancée unalived herself after I wouldn't take her back. Now, everyone's blaming me. Me and my ex-fiancée had been together for almost 6 years and engaged for 4 out of those 6 years. I was introduced to her by a close friend at a party, and we just clicked. She was attractive, had a great personality, and had similar hobbies as me, which made it perfect. Back in April of this year, I started noticing little changes in her. She started wearing more revealing clothes to work, started putting on more makeup, etc. To be honest, I had no problem with any of that stuff, as it's her body. She can wear whatever and put however much makeup she wanted to, but what made things worse for me was when she started coming home late from work, or how instead of spending the weekend off with me, she instead was always going out. I once had asked her why she never invited me to come out with her, to which she replied that it's only girls' night out and that her other friends would not be happy if I tagged along, as they were not bringing their own boyfriends with them. It all came crashing down when me and her had a huge fight in June because she decided that instead of going out on a date with me, she told me how she already had made plans with her friends and that it was rude of her to cancel. That was it for me. I fucking blew up at her and we had a huge fight, which resulted in her packing her bags and leaving. I didn't hear from her for almost a week. None of her friends knew where she was, and heck, none of her folks even knew what was going on until she finally contacted me and wanted to talk. Imagine my surprise when she confessed to me that there was another guy involved, and how all this time she was hanging out with him, when all this time she was lying to me about hanging out with her friends. I fucking blew up. I wanted nothing to do with her and was going to break up with her until she got on her knees and begged me to give her a second chance, which my dumbass self did, but only after she revealed everything to me, and she did. It made me fucking sick to my stomach, but in the end I forgave her and told her to delete all contact with the other guy, and that I expect her to have no contact with him going forward, which she promised, and things kinda went back to before. Heck, we were even spending more time together, but that feeling, that trust wasn't there anymore. Everything was kinda okay until 2 weeks ago, a friend of mine who was visiting another city, which was 3 hours from where I live, sent me a picture with the message, "Sorry bro," that broke my already broken heart into a billion little pieces. The picture was of my ex-fiancée at a mall 3 hours away from where we lived, holding hands with some stranger who I didn't know. I fucking broke down. I was heartbroken. She was a bitch, a piece of shit, especially since I thought she was at work while in reality she was 3 hours away holding hands with her lover. When I got home from work, I waited for her and right away confronted her, which she denied and called me a psycho for not believing her and that I was a piece of shit for not trusting her, until I showed her the picture that my friend sent me. Her face told me everything, and when the waterworks started I knew that I had made a huge mistake in taking her back, so I ended it. She cried and fucking begged me to think it over and not to throw away everything that we have together, which made me fucking angry, and I'm not going to lie, but I fucking slapped her. I was not proud. I'm still not, but she said shit like not to throw away everything when it was her who threw away everything that pissed me off. I told her to pack her shit and leave, called her parents and mine and told them everything. Her parents came to help her and I told them to basically fuck off after they told me to think it over and to make the right decision before actually ending it. She begged me not to end things, but I did, had to, for my own peace of mind. I did not hear from her or her parents until 3 days ago, when my parents called me to let me know that my ex-fiancée had unalived herself. Her parents found her hanging and she had left a letter apologizing to everyone, including my parents and me, and how she is sorry from the bottom of her heart for what she did to me and how she can't live without me, and because of that she ended it. I am at a fucking loss. My ex-fiancée friends and family are blaming me, and my own mother told me that it was my fault. She told me that I should have forgiven her since I'm clearly worth unaliving over. I am fucking disgusted. I have currently taken some time off from work and have not a single clue what to do. My husband forgot the past 8 years and now wants a divorce. I have been with my husband Josh since we were seniors in high school. We broke up shortly after high school graduation but got back together a year afterwards. We overcame long distance, educational and job difficulties, unplanned pregnancies, medical issues, everything. He is my first everything and I cannot imagine life without him. But now I have to get used to it. 2 months ago, Josh woke up next to me shocked. He asked what I was doing on his chest and who I was. He likes to sometimes wake me up saying, "Hey, who's this beautiful lady on my chest?" But this was different and he wouldn't let me touch him and he started demanding to know where he was and where a woman named Lisa was. I was confused and scared to say the least. I tried to explain that I'm his wife and that he's home safe. Josh yelled he would have never married me in a million years. He started running around our house looking at photos of us and out of the windows. He refused to let me get too close, so I called his mom and she talked to him on his phone. He freaked out that I knew his passcode and he started wailing about what was going on. I called his therapist and he was taken to the hospital. He was put on $5,150 and I had his mom come take him when it was up. When he got home a week later, he accepted that I was his wife but kept saying us being together was wrong. He didn't go to work for a bit and I noticed he was obsessively searching for a woman named Lisa who went to a college he turned down for me. I have never seen this woman and I wondered if he possibly had an affair in the past. I found messages to a number from him a week later where he begged Lisa to talk to him, but she said she had no idea who he was. The phone wasn't public, so he must have it memorized. I asked his mom about it and she asked him, to which he said she's the love of my life. He stopped and was so distraught he tried to take his own life. He went back to the facility and was evaluated again. I was given options but I wanted him home. So he was prescribed some medication. His sister stayed with us until he seemed stable. But Josh would act so coldly towards me, asking questions about why we got back together and how upset he was that we were. When we broke up originally, I cursed him out for 3 hours straight and later found out he had made a move on the girl he told me not to worry about. He would say he didn't know how he could love me again after all I said. He refused to do chores and would stay out into the night for hours. Over a month ago he came to me and asked for a divorce. He said when he told me that I should have found someone better after high school, and that I should have done that because he can't bring himself to love me. How can I be with someone who is so obviously embarrassed to be with the old me? I told him he's not that insecure little boy anymore and he was the love of my life. He had been publicly embarrassed years ago in regards to me. He used to be insecure that I was too good for him and that everyone knew that. My father, after meeting him, told me he was a loser. But I reminded Josh I chose him because I love him. I told him we moved past that and I thought we were good. He didn't believe me and said he couldn't imagine being happy with me. He left that night and was fine coming to get his things to move in with his sister. He looks at me with nothing but apathy and it hurts. His sister urged him to try again and he came back and I told him I don't want to throw away 10 years together over a mental break. We were both thriving career-wise and had virtually no issues up to this point. We were renovating this very house together. He agreed to try and we were fine for more than a month. It was like trying to date him again, but everything seemed to moving in a positive direction. We even slept together and I thought that was proof things were great. He was so caring and attentive like I remembered, so I figured he was getting there. He initiated it and wouldn't stop telling me how beautiful I was, like he remembered. Then 3 nights ago something happened. I came home from work to find Josh sitting quietly at the kitchen table, drinking. He never does that. He had been waiting for me and then slammed divorce papers and his phone onto the table. His phone was open to text messages with explicit photos and mentioning of a night together with a woman named Lisa. Not the same one, but apparently someone he met on Tinder. I will never forget the venom in his voice when he said, "Now will you divorce me?" I went to our room and locked the door and just cried. I heard him leave and his sister took him away. She texted me an apology and said she's turning him back into the facility, but I told her to just take him and I'll sign the papers but not to tell him I was. I'm floored. My mother and brother are flying to help me with this. Everyone is shocked and I cannot fathom what has happened. We had been trying for a baby too. I'm seeing if I miss my period because we did it unprotected, but now I wonder if I should get tested for STDs too. My family and fiancé excommunicated me after my sister sabotaged me. I need a little advice on the matter as I don't know what to do anymore. I was 21 when my fiancé asked me to marry him. He was the absolute light of my life. We had known each other since preschool, our families are very close. He would come and have dinner with us on a daily basis and vice versa. He doesn't have any siblings but I have 2 older sisters. Which is very important as he was also very close with them. We grew up together. When we started dating, I don't think our parents stopped celebrating for weeks. He helped me deal with a lot of my anxiety, and even when I gained a little weight and my mother berated me saying he was going to leave me, he told her off and said he loved me for who I was, not for what I looked like, even though he claimed I was the most beautiful girl in the world to him. We were only engaged for 6 months before the incident. My middle oldest sister, let's call her Nikki, was a very cold person. She never showed any affection. She only ever opened up to my fiancé as she said she saw him as a brother and he also helped her through a lot of her dark times such as battling drug addictions and breaking the law. She and I never saw eye to eye. I loved her dearly because she was my sister but didn't like her as a person. Out of the blue she tells me she wants to take me clubbing as we had never been together before and she felt bad that she was so distant to me. I agreed and that night we went out. Clubbing wasn't really my style, but once I had a few drinks, I loosened up a little and began having fun. The night was going smoothly until Nikki spotted a guy across the room whom she claimed she wanted to climb him like a tree. She walked over to him and within a few minutes she was back and she had a sour expression on her face. I asked her what was up but she never said anything. I kept pressing because I didn't want our night to be ruined. She then told me the guy didn't want her number but he wanted mine instead. I told her he was a loser and there were plenty of guys around who would kill to be with a girl like her. She didn't budge though. She told me she needed to use the restroom and then we would leave. I waited for another hour. During this time I was sipping on a lot of different cocktails. I then started feeling really dizzy and lightheaded. I figured I'd just cab it home as I was certain Nikki had left. On the way out though, I bumped into a friend of Nikki's whom she had briefly dated. He asked me if I needed a hand to my car and I explained I was getting a cab. He said he was getting ready to leave and we could share one. I told him okay and we walked out of the club together and into the first cab we saw. I tried to find my phone in my purse but I felt myself getting dizzier and dizzier. I don't remember what happened next as I blacked out and the next morning I woke up on a hard sofa, my head pounding. When I came to, I realized I was in Nikki's friend's house and my phone was sitting on the glass table in front of me, but it was dead on battery. When he noticed I was awake he offered some tablets and water and explained that I had passed out in the cab and he didn't remember my parents' address so he just picked me up and took me back here where he laid me on the sofa. I told him I needed to go home as my fiancée would be worried. He called a cab and I left. When I arrived at my parents' house, my mother, father, Nikki, my fiancé and his parents were all standing in the living room. I thought they were worried about me but the instant I opened my mouth my fiancé asked how could I do this to him? I tried to explain that my phone was dead but he then went on screaming about how I cheated on him. I was baffled. Why would he think that? I tried to explain the night's events but I kept getting cut off. Nikki then chimed in and said I was lying and asked how I could be so heartless to a man who has been there for me through thick and thin. She went on to say I kept flirting with random guys all night and then when she went to the bathroom, she saw me leave with her friend. I told her what had happened and she showed me photos on her phone where as we were leaving, his hand was on my back ushering me outside. Yes, the photo did look horrible and I was so drunk I didn't even realize his hand was on my back at all. My fiancé was so angry, he kept shouting and his mom and mine were both crying. I then asked Nikki to call her friend and he would confirm nothing happened but when she called him, he told a completely different story. He said I begged him to take me back to his and when he did, we slept together multiple times. I saw red and started crying and yelling at Nikki because I knew she had organized this whole thing to make me look bad. I begged my fiancé to believe me, but he just shook his head and left. When everyone had cleared out, my mother slapped me across the face and told me to get out. I left and went to a friend's house where I stayed for a few nights. During those nights I called my fiancé crying and pleading with him to believe me that nothing happened but it all fell on deaf ears as he never returned any of my calls or texts. My mom texted me and told me she was kicking me out and that she couldn't believe I would do such a thing and a lot of hurtful other slurs I don't think I could repeat here. She didn't even give me time to get my things as she threw everything out. I was now homeless. None of my family would take me in, as they chose my fiancé and mother's side. I was homeless and single in less than a day and a half. My entire world had been taken away because of Nikki's lies. Now for weeks I tried everything to get my fiancé and my family back. The limit for me though was when Christmas time had come and I went over to my mother's house to try and reconcile. I was sleeping from couch to couch during this time. When I got to my parents' house, I knocked on the door but no one answered. My friend then called me and told me she just saw on Facebook that my family were in another state celebrating Christmas and they had posted pictures online. Everyone was there, my sisters, parents, grandparents and even my fiancé and his family. When I myself saw the photos, I couldn't stop crying as they all looked so happy. I cried for days and days before deciding to block them all. I even returned my engagement ring. My friend knew someone a couple hours away who was looking for some help in his restaurant and he even had living arrangements above where he worked so I could get rent at a cheap price and work at the same time. I wanted to start over with my life as it hurt me that no one took my side and they all left me to fend for myself. I was able to move pretty quickly and was doing well. The apartment was tiny and I had to work 10+ hours almost every day, but I was able to save a lot of money. I'm not living in the apartment anymore. I was able to rent a much nicer condo but I am still working at the restaurant as assistant manager. Now it has been roughly 2 years since I left and have not spoken to any of my family. I had no idea what was going on with them until I got a knock on my door. It was my ex-fiancé. I was shocked to say the least. All these feelings came rushing back and all I wanted to do was jump into his arms. But then I remembered the pain I had felt and tried to slam the door in his face but he stopped it and asked that I let him explain. He said that Nikki had gotten married and she had confessed that she lied about the situation because she had found someone she loved so much and realized what a horrible thing she had done. I asked him how he found me and he said my friend told him. My entire family has been trying to get in touch with me and want to see me. I told him I needed time to see if I even wanted to have them in my life. He left and I have been a mess since. I don't know what to do. I know I will never ever forgive Nikki. She could rot for all I cared but it's hard because my other family and fiancé didn't know she was lying, but I also felt like they abandoned me too quickly without letting me explain my side. I don't know if I should forgive them. Any advice would be very helpful. My family and fiancé excommunicated me after my sister sabotaged me. Part 2. The last time I spoke to you all, my fiancé had just visited me after 2 years saying my family and him wanted to reconnect after my sister sabotaged me to make me look like I cheated. Well, I have an update for you. So I never got back to my ex. I didn't know what to do, but eventually he must have given my phone number to my parents as they texted asking to meet up. I never replied and was planning on organizing a Zoom meeting but didn't need to as they also showed up at my door. Well, my father did. When I answered the door and saw him standing there, I ended up throwing up which he insisted on cleaning. When he was done, we sat down and I just bursted in tears. My emotions were all over the place and my father has worn the same cologne for a really long time, so when I smelt it, it just brought back all these memories. He tried to hug me but I pushed him away and asked what he was doing here. He went on to explain he and my mother are getting a divorce. He said he begged my mother to get in touch with me the minute I left, but she refused and said I was acting like a baby and if I wanted to leave them after doing something so horrible, then I could do things on my own from then on. I asked him how long it took them to notice I was gone. He said they arrived back home after New Year's Eve and were planning on inviting me over so we could talk. That's when they got in touch with my friend and she told them I left and she didn't know where I was. I asked him why he didn't listen to my side of the story and why they threw me away so easily. He just started crying. He said he never meant for things to get so out of hand and he wishes more than anything he could take it all back. I said when they found out Nikki was taking drugs and had dropped out of high school, they didn't throw her away. Instead we all went on a holiday so she could focus on things besides drugs, and during that trip, she got hooked on alcohol and each time they defended her over and over. He said he had no idea my mother was going to kick me out. He thought it was going to be for a few days, but then they decided at the last minute to spend Christmas out of state. My mother apparently promised him I would be allowed back home after they got back. I said she threw away all my stuff, but he said everything was still there and she lied about that. I asked him what had happened to Nikki and he said she is dead to him. He wants nothing to do with her, but my mother has been crying to him, asking to forgive Nikki as she is not well and they had already lost one daughter. They cannot lose two. He blocked my mother and Nikki and has been on my ex's case about finding me. My ex caved in when my dad said he blocked my mother and Nikki and told him where I lived. I asked that he never show up again unless I give him permission and he agreed. He asked what would happen now and I said I really don't know and that he hurt me really bad. I then just went into detail about how much he hurt me and what it felt like seeing them so happy without me and how hard it has been. We were both crying by the end of it, but I was really glad I got it all out. It felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. My dad then said he knew a few places around the area and would help get me a better apartment, and he said he would help get me a better job, but I told him I wouldn't be leaving this job as my boss helped me out so much and I wanted to repay him at all costs. I said I didn't want him to do anything for me, but that I do want to reconcile, but it has to be on my own terms and it is going to take a very, very long time to trust him again, and I may never trust him again. He said he would do anything to make up for what he did. I asked him why Nikki did this and if she said anything about it. Well, she said she thought my ex deserved better than me and she wanted to see him happy because he was making too many sacrifices in the relationship. She loved him like a brother and wanted to break the engagement off. So that night she asked her friend to come and escort me out of the club so she could get photos and to take me home so her plan could work. She said nothing sensual happened. I went to sleep on the sofa and that was it. He was up playing video games all night until I woke up, which he has proof of apparently. My dad was planning on getting my stuff from my mother's house and bringing it to me, but I told him I didn't want those things anymore. I then went to ask about Nikki's husband and he said my mother has been hush-hush with the entire situation, but he had his number and wrote it down for me. After my dad left, I decided to call Nikki's husband. I was sweating the entire time and felt so sick. What if I could hear her in the background? Well, anyhow, when he picked up, I just spit everything out, which I deeply regret because I should have eased into it for him. He sounded really confused and I explained the entire situation again. I even went into detail about her drug and alcohol problems. I was honestly expecting him to curse me out and defend Nikki. Instead, he let out a long sigh and well, turns out, he had a feeling she wasn't exactly innocent. Turns out her and his sister have been having problems and she has been spouting non-stop lies about his sister and has caused a huge rift between them. His sister didn't even attend their wedding. I told him I was sorry, but he should make things right with his sister because Nikki was the problem, not her. We spoke a little more and he hung up. I'm not entirely sure what he is going to do with that information. I hope he cuts his losses and leaves her because he sounded like a really nice person, and even he has lost his own sister because of Nikki. So I have decided to reconcile with my dad. My mother has always run the show their entire marriage, so the fact he is putting his foot down and divorcing her and going no contact with Nikki shows he is serious about wanting to make amends. I don't think I will ever reconcile with my mother, as she thinks Nikki is a victim also in all this, and at this point I don't care to listen to her excuses. If she reaches out and we talk, I will update the post again. For my ex, I haven't had the time to meet with him and talk, though my dad mentioned he wanted to come with my dad, but he told him I would be too overwhelmed if both were there, and seeing them separated will help make clear decisions. He also mentioned my ex was arrested for assaulting Nikki's friend who lied about the entire situation. He was being charged, but the charges were dropped a few days later. I will update the post again when I have time to speak to my ex. Thank you guys for listening to this story. It's something that has been bottled up in me for a long time.